Welcome to all. This is S. Gogulakrishnan and my teammate is S. Neelakandan. Our remote center code is 1045. Our topic is Welcome to OSI. So the learning objectives of our course is at the end of this lecture the students should be able to get an introduction to the OSI model of networking and to examine the 7 layers of OSI and finally get a general feel for the purpose of each and every layer. So why use layers? So there are three reasons to use the layers. The first one, it's new standards can be developed at one layer without having to rework all other layers. The second one, the knowledge of what goes on it at each layer helps the troubleshooting process, and finally it simplifies the learning the process. These are all the 7 layers of OSI. It starts with the application layer. It's an higher layer of that OSI model, and it ends with the physical layer. It's a lower level layer of that OSI model. So how to remembering the layers? The first one, the layer 7 to layer 1 from top to bottom. So there is one sentence: apple pie seems to need dill pickles. From layer 1 to layer 7, from bottom to top. So the sentence is that people don't need to see private actions. These are all the two sentences the students can easily remember the layers. So moving data between layers. So each layer at one device only communicates with its counterpart on other devices. That is it's a process of peer entities, and no layer does the work or fixes the problem of another layer. And the third one, the data moves from layer to layer by way of service access points. So these are all the protocol data units used in 7 layers. So some layers uses messages, and transport layer uses a segment, and network layer uses packets. Data link layer uses a frame protocol data unit, and the physical layer uses bits as a protocol data unit. So it's one simple example of sending a letter. So here the process of sending a letter from a sender to receiver, it takes several steps. That letter is written by that sender and puts an envelope and dropped in that mailbox, and this letter is taken from a mailbox from the post office, and the letter is delivered to a carrier by the post office. So in the receiver side, again the letter is delivered from the carrier to the post office, and then the letter is carried from the post office to the mailbox, and finally the receiver receives that letter and removed that envelope and read that message. So it's an example of the OSI layer. So these are all the representations of the OSI model. So the summary of the OSI model, that is the responsibilities of the each and every layer. The application layer is responsible to allow the access to the network resources, and the presentation layer is in responsibility to translate, encrypt and compress the data. So each and every layer has its own responsibilities, and the first of all we will discuss the application layer. It's a higher layer of that OSI model. So it acts as an interface between a user apps and the network. And the second one, the protocol data unit used in this layer is a message. So the first line of command for a process called flow control. So here the use of that application layer, so it acts as an interface, and these are all the protocols used in that application layer. So the very familiar protocols are telnet, ftp, smtp, http and pop, dns. So the presentation layer, so it's an it makes sure data is in that correct format, and also it manages the uniform character sets, because the systems used the character sets, it's an independent one. Suppose you want to send the another character sets of some other remote receiver side, so there is a different in character sets. So it manages that uniform character sets, and it handles data encryption. So the data are encrypted in that sender side, and also it is decrypted in that receiver side, and also it manages the data compression. So the use of the data compression, it compresses the size of the data. And the responsibilities of the session layer, it sets up and breaks down the virtual connections between communicating devices, and also it maintains the connection while it is in active mode, and also it juggles multiple open connections at the same time. So under the protocols used in the session layers are NFS, SQL, RPC, UDP, NCP, ACP and ADSP. The responsibilities of a transport layer, it breaks the data stream down into manageable chunks called the segments. Here the transport layer uses the segments concept, and also it performs a packet level error reduction and correction method, and it monitors time to live, that means a TTL, to determine if packets have been lost. And finally it handles end-to-end flow control. And the protocols used in that transport layers are TCP, UDP, and ATP, NBP, ZIP, SPP, and PEP. The responsibilities of the network layer, it manages the traffic between different networks, and also it controls the network addressing functions, and it is responsible for routing. And finally the protocol data unit used in that network layer is packets. So these are all the protocols used in that network layer. So the very familiar protocols used in that network layer protocols, it's an IP, internet protocol, and internet control message protocol, ICMP. The other protocols are IPX, RIP, DDP, RTMP, ARP, RARP, OSPF. So the responsibilities of the data link layer, it is subdivided into two sub layers. The first one, it's a MAC layer, and the second one is a LL layer. First one, the MAC, it's a media access control, and the second one is an LLC, logic link control. It determines methods by which data moves across the medium, and also it defines network access methods. So these are all the protocols used in that data link layer. So the first one, it's an 802.3, it's an Ethernet. Suppose you want to use a token ring, means they use the 802.5 token ring concept. So and also it uses ISDN, integrated services digital network, and FDDA, fiber received data interchange. And the physical layer, it's a final layer of that OSI model. It defines the network media. So what type of transmission media we want to select. So there are several transmission medias are available. For example, so the transmission medias are divided into two categories. The first one, it's an wired, and the second one is an unwired. The meaning is it's a guided and unguided media. So in that guided media, so you can use a coaxial cable, the fiber optic cable, and twisted pair cables. In that case of wireless or unguided media, so we can go with the satellite transmission and the other concepts. And also the second responsibility of physical layer, it defines the physiology of connectors and plugs, and it places the data on the wire as in bits. So these are all the summaries of or duties of the layers. The application layers, already we discussed, it allow access to the network resources, and the transport layer, it provides a reliable process to process message delivery and error recovery. Here, so the 5 layers are the internet protocol layers. So what we discussed in previous, so that is 7 layers of OSI. So that 7 layers of OSI are merged as a 5 layers in the concept of internet protocol layers. And the physical layer, so what is the main use of that physical layer? It uses the various transmission medium, and also it defines the topology used in that networking. For example, there are various topologies in that networking. So for example, the use of a star topology, the use of bus topology, or mesh, or any other type of topologies. So based on that application, so it will uses the topologies in that particular one. And again, so you want to discuss the summaries of the OSI model. So here the physical layer, it transmits bits over a medium to provide mechanical and electrical specifications. So the physical layer is responsible for determine the specifications of electrical and mechanical aspects, and the data link layer, it organizes bits into frames, and also it provides hope to hope delivery. And the responsibility of a network layer, it's move the packets from source to destination, and also it provides the internetworking concept. And the responsibilities of a transport layer, it provides a reliable process to process message delivery and error recovery. And the responsibility of a session layer, it establishes and manages and also terminates the sessions in that particular one. And the use of the presentation, it translates, encrypts and compresses the data. And finally the application layer, it acts as an interface. So already we discussed this is 7 layers in detail, and this is a summary of that OSI model. So the main idea of that OSI model, so you want to use the each and every layer in a single system, the same that the layers are communicates with the other systems layers. So that's all about the OSI layer model. So thank you for giving this opportunity.